Hi, and welcome to LGBTQ Now. My name is Natalie Walmsley. I am a writer and performer, and LGBTQIA storytelling is at the heart of everything that I do. As a writer, it sort of fuels me to write. Queer narratives are so important for me to tell. So I really wanted to do this discussion. I wanted to bring together an amazing array of creatives, of policy change makers, and of broadcasters so we could all come together and have an open conversation about what we're doing and hopefully the positive impact it will have on children. It's really important to note that as queer storytellers, you have a massive platform to actually say and produce authentic representation. When I first started out in my first writers' rooms, I was really privileged to be part of two live action shows that actually had the first two coming out scenes in the UK, which was amazing, but that's just the beginning. I'm sure some of you are aware that in September of this year, the government is disbanding Section 28 effectively, and the national curriculum will now include LGBTQ education in both primary school and secondary school. So in light of this, I think this is a real chance for the media to really step up with how much we reflect LGBTQIA narratives and stories in the work that we do.
Hello, my name is Dr. Ellie Barnes, MBE, and I am the CEO and founder of an LGBT educational charity called Educate and Celebrate.
Hey, I'm Eric Casimiro, Senior Vice President of Nickelodeon Preschool. Overseeing, pretty much my job is to oversee all the development and production of our preschool brand, Nick Jr., and the Nick Jr. block on Big Kids, Nick channel, as well as the channel itself in the States.
Hello, my name's Leah Kirby, also known as Cyro. I'm a drag performer, activist and writer. I perform in Fantabulosa, a drag show for kids.
Hi, I'm Ollie Pike and I am the director of Pop and Ollie, which is an LGBT edutainment resource for children, parents, carers and teachers.
Hi, my name's David Levine. I've been a children's media executive for over 20 years, and I've been active in the LGBTQ space, both supporting Disney employees within our company and also putting LGBTQ characters and themes in our content.
As queer people, when we grow up and we don't see ourselves represented, it can immediately cause like an internal shame. And I think that actually starts very, very young. You know, me and a lot of my peers and friends will say that the content that we first saw ourselves in was when we were teenagers, and even that's changed significantly from generations above us. So now I'm incredibly excited that a whole new generation of kids are going to grow up and hopefully see themselves, their friends, their family makeups, and also different family makeups and other people's family makeups as just being normalised and accepted. One of the main questions that I wanted to ask was, imagine what it would have been like to grow up and have seen LGBTQ representation. And so what is being done? How can we do more? And how can we be truly authentic? So so grab yourselves a cup of tea or a cup of whatever you fancy and enjoy, and I'll see you at the end.
It would have been amazing if I'd had LGBT inclusive books when I was growing up. Not just like the ones I'm producing, but ones like The Black Flamingo by Dean Atter. I love Are You a Boy or Are You a Girl? There's so many inclusive, diverse books out there. They would have been awesome for me as a kid, just knowing that, it's okay to be different and it's okay to be myself. Because I think what a lot of young LGBT people are feeling is that it's not that they know that they're LGBT+, but it's just that they know that they're different.
I would have loved to have seen something like The Lodge, which was something that we did in the UK where we had one of our characters come out. It was the first time Disney Channel had ever done that, and something that I am really proud of being a part of and helping to drive. And also, seeing Cyrus on Andy Mack, for me as a white, cisgendered Jewish male, that kid was basically me. So I think my life probably would have been really different. Certainly it would have been probably a lot easier had a show with Cyrus been around when I was a kid.
I never saw, in my mind, any representation of same-sex female couples, especially same-sex black female couples, or anyone on the gender spectrum. So it's taken me 25 years to really start accepting and understanding who I am, even though all the signs of those things were there growing up. I always knew them. All I did was work hard on how to hide those things about me. If I'd have had those there, it would have changed everything.
I would have been so happy to see representation and to see a character that, wasn't good at sports, maybe was called a sissy a lot, and not the butt of the joke, which if sometimes it showed up, the sissy, as we all know, sissy comedy was a thing for so long, and it became a trope of comedy that also was at their expense. So as a young kid, you're like, whoa, why are they always the one that gets made fun of? I think to see that representation so cleanly, a very dear friend said how important Will and Grace was to them as a teenager, and that it showed that you could be on your own and funny and respected, and I was jealous even when that came along because I didn't have anything like that. And even now, when you look at that feels somewhat aged on the shelf versus where we are today.
I mean, for myself, the only representation that was on TV was people like Larry Grayson. And Martina Navratilova was the only out lesbian when I was growing up. And it's such a different climate now for our young people. And it makes their self-confidence go through the roof, knowing that there are people like them and they are out there and they're not growing up feeling like they're different, like people like myself did. We didn't know where we fit. Representation in the media is absolutely key. Representation everywhere, all over, is absolutely key. Because what we have to remember is that our young people are not born with prejudice. They are not born sexist, racist, homophobic, biphobic, transphobic. These are things that they learn from outside influences. So really, from the grown-ups. So what we need to think about, if our kids can learn to be prejudiced, then guess what? Well, they can unlearn it. And a lot of the time, that is what we're doing with the grown-ups. We're getting them to unlearn prejudice that they have learned. So, for instance, if we're doing work with early years students, which I love, I learned so much, because young people, they will play with anyone. They don't care what your background is or if you have disabilities, what your gender is. There's just no thought process around it. You're just another human being. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could bottle that and just keep that as our students get older? So having the representation from the start through books. There's a fantastic book that we read with early years called Mummy, Mama and Me. And one of my teacher colleagues was reading the book and was really desperately trying to get a reaction from the early years class by going, Mama lifts me up, up, up. Mama pours juice in my cup. But of course, it's a family with two mums. And of course, because they're so young, there was just no reaction whatsoever. You're just reading a lovely story to them. This is a family. Are this family happy? Yes, they are. And that is exactly the sort of representation that we need in the media, where being queer is just one little facet of somebody's personality when you're seeing them on the TV, because people are multi-layered and are multifaceted. What is fabulous for us as educators is the fact now we have amazing influencers that are on YouTube for our young people to access, which is so very different from how me and other teachers grew up. Working with influencers from YouTube has been really beneficial, and having them come to our Pride Youth Network conference every year has been even more beneficial for those young people. So it would be so wonderful to have more of that on TV in the programmes that we are watching, and that would make such a difference to the lives of our young people.
So Popanoli is an LGBT plus edutainment resource, and it's used by children, parents, carers and teachers across the UK and beyond to teach about equality and diversity. And we have videos and books, and they aim to usualize different types of people, including those that are LGBT plus. I was inspired by so many different things to start creating this type of content. I think firstly, my own experience growing up as LGBT plus, I just know that if I'd had this type of content when I was younger, it would have just made life a lot easier for me. Secondly, my own experience as an adult with homophobia, it's often made me think, like, where does that come from? Who's taught homophobia, or who's taught that it's not, who's not taught that it's not okay, if that makes sense. And then I guess finally, it's just like the statistics that we see that LGBT plus related bullying is the most common form of bullying found in UK schools, and the amount of children that are, self-harming and even attempting to take their own life because they are LGBT or trans. And it's statistics like that which really break my heart and have made me want to really do something about it.
The most important thing is to normalize the existence of the different elements of the world around. And I think by normalizing it, it just becomes accepted, and it's a thread in the fabric versus, putting a lot of light and trying to explain an issue that, especially for our preschool, is very difficult. I mean, as you get older, and I'm sure like you can what you could tackle on MTV is very different than what we tackle on Nick Jr. But if we just show the world and it's there, and it need not be something that is seen as any kind of flaw or fault. It's just part of the world we live in. We want to make sure when we put our slate together that we can say we've really covered a really wide spectrum of existence for kids. And again, do no harm. We always sort of second and third guess ourselves to make sure that there's no bad message in anything. The considerations with which we evaluate a project are pretty deep, but they are, again, it's with this wide-eyed. And so we're always open for what's most important to us. And this was a big initiative that Brian Robbins brought in and Ramsey Nido, which was bring back the creators' voices. Where are those shows that aren't necessarily designed to just be a fantastic CP property, for instance, but bring back those properties. Bring back that sort of spirit of creators coming in with their own vision, their own voice.
So I'm part of a wonderful show called Fantabulosa, and we tour around the country performing a drag show for kids using educational books from the Seeds programme, introducing LGBTQIA plus stories to children. There's colour, there's dance, there's song. We all use our individual drag skills to express ourselves and show the beauty of queer theatre. So with Fantabulosa, we get a vast age range in our audiences, and that goes from little babies to big adults. And the thing we've heard most from parents is that they're so happy to see that representation. We had a comment from an older lady who came with her granddaughter and told us that if the show had been around when her friend was alive, she thinks that her friend would still be alive today. And that sits with all of us and resonates as a very truthful and honest experience of what this show can do. We also have the little babies and toddlers running around during our show and just enjoying the colour of it. Even for the children who don't know how to speak yet, don't know how to walk, they're still absolutely taken aback by all the colour and laughter and light of the show. So it can be appreciated on on a more deeper level and emotional resonance, and it also can be appreciated as just this fun, beautiful, colourful representation of what life is. So my experience as a drag artist and how the media portrays us, it ranges on which media is reporting. I think there is a lot of hyper-sexualization of drag artists as this adult thing, and I think that is because the representation that we're seeing is a very one-sided type of drag. I think a lot of people will go to RuPaul's Drag Race as their reference point, which is a great entry level for mainstream, but there is a vast history and richness in its history as a whole. We always talk about Stonewall as a first reference point on revolution and queer people, and it was Stormé de la Vere, who was a butch lesbian, mixed-race lesbian, who threw the first punch, and then Martha P. Johnson, of course, throwing the first brick. And I don't think when we talk about pride and when we talk about representation when it comes to drag and children, we embrace the celebration of the liberation and beginnings of what feels like equality, but we forget that the representation and the people that brought us there were trans women and butch, gender fluid people of colour that were at the forefront of that fight. And if we're not representing that in our art and our stories, then we are just telling one side of a multicolour rainbow that we say we embrace and value and enjoy, but actually we're leaving behind the very people that got us to where we are today. Immediately they're taken aback by how you look. You're confronting a heteronormative version and cis version of the world with this colour and this license to be yourselves. So one, you're instilling a sense of self-worth and that they can be whatever they want to be, that they don't need to adhere to any beauty standards or any expectation of who they should be or what they should look like. And two, with the educational side of it, they absorb everything you say. So just by me being there, just by someone that's representing something other than what you see as a norm, standing there on stage, already is a political act.
Things have moved on a bit since then, and we've had great representation of trans kids, for example, with the show First Day, produced out of Australia. On Disney Channel, we've had a great campaign this year where we've had the stars of a number of our shows wishing our audience a happy Pride. So those have been running all throughout the Pride Month in the UK. You have other broadcasters that have had a lot of material on their Twitter feeds, and then you have a show like She-Ra on Netflix where She-Ra comes out and has a romantic relationship with her arch nemesis at the end of the season. Sorry, spoilers. In order to be authentic, producers can bring in LGBTQ writers or creatives into the process to be able to provide input on stories, themes, and characters to make sure that they are relevant and meaningful and are authentic to the community. And if that's not an option, once you've produced something, or if you're in the writing process, you can reach out to organizations to get some support. One such organization is GLAAD. They're based in the US, and they're an organization that has been around for a while, and they make sure that there's positive representation for LGBTQ people in the media, and they can support you in your creative process.
Even when I first joined Nick Jr., I noticed that a lot of the development slate had a very traditional family systems. And I was like, that's odd, because statistically there are more non-traditional family systems than traditional. And so that's a big initiative. We just said, okay, wow, we've lost a way. Even if it's a family of badgers or a family of mice, we really need to do that job and make sure that we have shown that there are different structures for kids.
I think with regards to LGBT plus stories and characters in children's media at the moment, it's kind of there, but it's not like completely there yet in terms of traditional broadcasting. I know there's a few channels out there who are doing some really good stuff. We've seen like a few LGBT plus characters on channels like Cartoon Network and Disney, which is awesome, but it's like we need more of it. And I kind of feel like that's where new media is kind of maybe overtaking traditional broadcasting in that sense. Like, in terms of like my channel, Pop and Ollie, like all of our videos have LGBT plus characters in, and it's not like a big deal. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, this character's gay or this character's trans. The story doesn't tend to focus on that element, and that's where I would like to see more channels going.
We have taken so much from Black gay culture that we use today, that has now been trickled down into what we call pop culture. We see in cartoons, we see in our children's films. I know I've seen it, and we have no reference of where it came from. So it's the meaning and the importance of that language is completely lost. Telling the truth about where we came from and taking accountability is so important to honour the people that make it able for me to perform today, but also to keep us safe for the future, to keep the conversation going. We need to see stories about Black trans people, and we need to be showing the world that it's not coming from a place of fear. I think a lot of the stories that gain a lot of traction and gain a lot of clickbait is stories of fear, of sensationalizing the idea of a queer person or a trans person being in a role rather than celebrating it. So you're already opening up conversations with a debate where it shouldn't be. It should just be a celebration of that person being there and a chance for us to listen to their voice, rather than an opinion poll on whether you think they should be there or they shouldn't. The fact is they need to be there. If you're representing life in general, then we are there. We have been there this entire time, and we deserve a place at the table, not just as performing entertainment for the people at the top of the table.
That's not to say that we're doing everything we can. I think there's always more to be done and always more to be explored. It's really interesting. A lot of my New York colleagues talk about how their children go to school with gender non-binary kids and how much more common that is there than, say, in Oklahoma. And is it more common there than Oklahoma, or just more spoken about there, more freely spoken about there than it is in Oklahoma? I'm just using an example. Maybe, but by us talking about it and representing it, it becomes, again, that normalized thing. It just becomes something that's there that can be talked about in a home in Oklahoma. And because, remember, our prime focus is really to entertain kids, right? This world is increasingly freaky, and they need something that makes them laugh, forget about the scariness of the world, and ideally, when we're making them laugh, it's really hard to take on really important social stories, but if you can make them laugh, you do it.
While I think we've definitely made progress by having a number of gay male characters, particularly Disney has done a good job of that between The Lodge, between Andy Mack and High School Musical, the series, where frankly we've all fallen a bit short is portraying lesbian girls in the medium. It's something that I'd love to see happen. And while First Day is a great step in the right direction as regards trans representation, there's definitely more that can be done. And a lot of it can just be hopefully done in a way that I would call usualizing, which is making it a usual part of whatever the setting is, particularly in a live action school, real world situation, to have it as a usual thing that you've got a broad range of kids in any particular class or scene.
Yes, we have experienced somewhat of a backlash over recent years, which was just for me like going back to the 80s, which is like, where did that come from? How did that suddenly appear again? And for us in education, it feels very much like it was a lack of education. And this is a total lack of information going to our parents. I mean, the parents' protests, my feeling is because the parents didn't understand what was changing and what was happening in schools. We, as government workers and government bodies, are following an act called the Equality Act, which came out in 2010. So we are ensuring that all of those protected characteristics are highlighted within our school. So we want to make sure that everyone is represented. So regardless of their age, their disability, their gender identity, whether they're married or pregnant, their race, religion, or their beliefs, or their sexual orientation. And all of these need to have equal value, because there is no hierarchy of equality, and it's the hierarchy where I think we found the problems. You know, we're living in a more right-wing society. We are becoming more right-wing, and that is a problem, because we're buying into that philosophy of divide and rule, where we're pitting one group against another. It's like that analogy of, if we fight for rights for this particular group, it means another group will have less. But it doesn't mean that, because it's a pie. There's enough pie for everyone. And if everybody's voices are heard within that, then we can have a more equal and fair society. And we know when we do that, that people are happier and they are more productive. And I know that is the way to go. And we can start doing that by usualizing. So if we are usualizing difference, everybody will become less fearful, because it's my belief that it's just a fear of difference. And when we get away from that fear and show representation of different types of people, that, guess what, they're just the same as everybody else, then we can definitely move forward into the beautiful land of social justice, which is definitely where I want to live, where we are all treated equally and fairly.
We've had a lot of backlash from adults and public. As you know, there's the protests in Birmingham, and we've been at the forefront in trying to create something positive that people can access. The show is free. It's in outdoor spaces. We travel around the country to places that don't see drag. And with that comes some danger. From personal experience, we've been held abuse by passers-by, by people. We've had water thrown on us as if it was acid attacks. And all whilst doing this, trying to put on a children's theatre show. I think we haven't been supported by our efforts from the media, and in some cases from festivals. If you're going to make a change in art and book people for that change that are good at their jobs and put on a fantastic show and make people feel welcome and educate, you need to protect them. And this is where the work needs to be done. For instance, the media telling our story about Fantabulosa, sharing that, it means that there's more. If more people know about us, there's more access to us. The only story I do have is there was a 14-year-old girl that came to see Fantabulosa. She was mixed race, and I got a message from her. She had been doing drag a couple of years prior and was getting badly teased and bullied about it. And after she saw Fantabulosa, she told me that she has the confidence to start doing it again. I never thought that I would be giving that back to that version of myself. And that's what motivates me every day, is that I know just me being on stage and openly being who I am, proudly and with joy and honesty, it will empower or give someone else just the permission from themselves that they can do the same. All kids want is permission. They just want to please and make people happy. And if you tell children that they can be whoever they want to be and that they are valued and their differences are important, then you're setting them up for greatness already. And there's no limit to what they can achieve. They don't have to go through the things that we went through as kids and all those barriers. They can thrive and create much further than we ever could. So I think it's our duty, and we owe it to ourselves and our younger selves, the child within us, that we represent and let them know who they are is important, and they are loved and they are valued as a member of society, and one day they will do the same for someone else.
I think that we are just being very mindful and facing the headwinds straight on. There's a big part of Nick's history, again, that is speaking to the real kid. And I think Nickelodeon started with this like cheeky, you can't do that on television, like let's show the way the kids were. It's important that all these stories are included. And we, again, I hate to harp on this sort of global inclusion, but that's really sort of the initiative, right? And as part of that is telling those stories. This year we received 3 GLAAD nominations. I mean, Nick has had a long history of GLAAD nominations as well. I don't like to say paving. I just think we're reflecting the world and really being brave under the leadership we have at Nickelodeon, who's a super brave guy. We're taking a stand and saying it right out loud.
What's next for Pop and Ollie? Oh my gosh, so much. Well, I'm always writing a new book. I'm writing a new book at the moment. I'm actually going to be releasing my first non-fiction book, which is actually going to be like a guide to what LGBT plus means and what pride means and where that came from for primary age children. So I'm looking forward to releasing that at some point over the next year or so. I'm always going to be creating more videos, so make sure you check out the channel at youtube.com/Pop and Ollie. And I have just recently started a podcast, which is great for me because it's finally given me a bit of an adult voice on my channel. I talk to the kids all the time, which I love doing. I love doing that, but I really want to be able to use my adult voice like I'm using right now, and that's why I've started a podcast called Equality Education, and that is for teachers and parents or anyone who wants to learn how we can all come together and create a kind of more accepting society for the future.
Yeah, campaigning is still really high on the agenda until we live in a more equal and fair society. We may have laws right now, but we certainly haven't changed hearts and minds. And that is what we are still in the process of changing. And unfortunately, that is being dogged at the moment by some political rhetoric at the moment, because we have MPs who are trying to take the rights of the trans community away, which is already one of the most marginalised communities in this country, and not going forward with the reforms that we all voted for in the consultation of the Gender Recognition Act. And it's so easy to compare that back to the AIDS crisis, and then Thatcher brought in Section 28. It's almost like these laws are sneakily being brought in whilst we're in the middle of a crisis, thinking that we won't notice. But of course we notice, and already there's been 20,000 letters that have been sent to Boris objecting to the new proposals. So of course we have to keep up our fight and our voices being heard. And this is something that we really like to do with our young people, particularly in secondary schools. We've got a project called the Pride Youth Network, and that engages our young people in political activity, but not only that, also as a support network for each other, because unfortunately in some schools the support networks just aren't there for our young queer kids. The stats are still incredibly high. We still have in 2020 48% of young people under the age of 26 who have attempted suicide and 80% who have actually thought about it. So we are still not yet in a place where LGBT plus people are being treated equally and fairly, both in law and in hearts and minds.
Do we still need to be campaigning for this type of education and edutainment? Yes, we do. It's super important. I think just because we've got this new government guidance that says schools need to be LGBT plus inclusive in their teaching, it's not enough to just sit back on it. We need to make sure that all schools are doing this. And unfortunately, at the moment, not all schools are doing this because of various reasons, because maybe it's the first time they've come across this and they're not sure how to do it or what's the best way to do it. They might be concerned about what parents might think in their community. We saw some stuff in the media last year where certain communities weren't happy about LGBT plus inclusive books being used in school teaching, which was such a shame. But luckily, the right thing happened in that situation. This is why we have to push this extremely hard and let every child know that whoever they grow up to be and whoever their friends grow up to be is absolutely fine.
So let's all jump on the rainbow bus and let's go on that journey to LGBT plus inclusion and make sure we have embedded gender identity and sexual orientation into the fabric of everything we do. And together we can create that future of inclusion and social justice.
And thank you to everyone who took part in this discussion. There will be links and resources available up on the CMC website. And if you'd like to get in touch with anyone on the panel or myself, please do feel free to reach out. Thank you to Juliet for exec producing this. Thank you to Craig for editing. You're the best. And thank you to everyone at CMC for being so supportive in this discussion. And take care. And hopefully we'll be able to do this next year in a room full of peoples and all of us together. Wouldn't that be nice? Take care and all the best. Bye.